So you want to win money on DraftKings this week? Well, you're going to need to know the right guys to play. These are the must-have players for your Week 3 lineups. And we're starting with a man who is far too cheap, $6,500 Leonard Fenet, who on the season right now is a top 5 running back in terms of his usage. 3rd in snap share, 4th in opportunity share, and last week he saw 93% of the backfield opportunities, which ended up breaking down to 24 carries and 4 targets. The guy just hasn't scored a touchdown this year, which is why his price is so low. And now he gets the Packers run defense that ranks 31st in run stop and 31st in tackling. Fournette's a favorite. This is a great spot. And speaking of the Packers, we're going to find a great leverage play in A.J. Dillon on the opposite side of this game at just $6,000. Now look, the Packers just have a 19.5 point team total, and he's an underdog, which is normally a bad spot for running backs. However, Dillon is low owned and he's being prioritized in this offense. Now the man only scored 7.7 fantasy points last week, but check this out. On Sunday Night Football against the Bears, it was a blowout. Maybe you didn't tune into that game fully, but he saw 21 opportunities, 18 carries, and 3 targets. He leads this backfield in opportunities through 2 weeks over Aaron Jones. His 37 total opportunities is actually top 10 in the NFL amongst running backs right now. So no, he's not a backup running back. He's a 1A to Aaron Jones 1A, which is what Matt LaFleur said at the beginning of the season. And he has 6 red zone touches through 2 games. Those are the money touches, the upside. So I like Dillon, who's just 2% owned in my ownership projections, purely as a leverage play. And as an underdog, I also like his receiving prop here. He's seeing 3 or 4 targets a game right now, over 13.5 receiving yards. I'll take this. It's on Prize Picks. You get a free bet up to $100 when you use the link in the description and code SAL22 if you want to take advantage of that free bet. We'll have some more props throughout. And let's start with wide receivers, and this guy's a must. He is dirt cheap at just $4,700. Bucks potential wide receiver 1 this week, Russell Gage. And I say that because Mike Evans is suspended, Chris Godwin is still not practicing, and Julio Jones is dealing with a knee injury, won't be 100% even if he plays, which leaves Russell Gage as the best option here in the passing game. And last year, Gage was a top 20 wide receiver in Atlanta, a bad offense, 29th ranked offense in the NFL, and now he's going to be playing in a better offense with Tom Brady, and he was top 12 last year at beating man coverage. He knows how to get open, which means Brady can trust him, and Gage has a good matchup. This Packers secondary, especially on the outsides and their safeties, is strong, but in the slot, Rasul Douglas will be there, and he's allowed 100% catch rate so far this year. He's a solid cornerback, but he will allow you to catch the ball. So play Gage, but then also get this rookie value. That would be $4,900 Lon Burks, who is seeing his role increase heading into week 3. He ended up playing more snaps and running 41% more routes in week 2 compared to week 1, and that right now he already has 11 targets on the season on just 29 routes run. Here's what this means. He has been insanely efficient. See for yourself. As you can see from my tweet right here, he's one of the most efficient wide receivers. He's top 5 in targets per route and yards after the catch per target, which just means now he needs more volume, and he's starting to get it. The breakout is approaching. So play him before he breaks out, and then play this leverage, low-owned running back. I love this guy this week. It's $5,200 Michael Carter, who, again, he's going to be low-owned, and he's the RB1 right now ahead of Breece Hall. He's played 60% of the snaps each week right now, and very quietly, he's ran the 2nd most routes amongst running backs in the NFL. Here's what that's led to. It's led to him being 2nd amongst running backs with 12 receptions and 14 targets. And this is what we want. He's an underdog in this game. We want more routes run. We want the potential for him to catch 5 or 6 balls. But I also like him on the ground to be decently efficient. His total is just set at 35.5 rushing yards. I take the over here. I have him in the upper 40s, believe it or not. And you can too. You can take this with that free bet up to $100 if you're a first-time depositor with the link in the description. Check it out. And then check out this interesting wide receiver. And that's $3,400 Ben Scaronik, I believe it's pronounced Scaronik, but Scaronik at $3,400. Look, Van Jefferson is not going to be practicing this week, and he's going to be the clear wide receiver 3 for the Rams. And that's what he's been doing the last 2 weeks. He's played over 80% of the snaps this year. He's averaging 33 routes run per game. Anything above 30 is borderline elite, and it's led to decent volume, 9 total targets on the year. He's basically just a cheap option that allows you to fit those stacks with Cooper Kupp, who's expensive, and Matthew Stafford, if you so wish. Now let's talk about an elite running back, and that will be Alvin Kamara, who's practicing this week. He practiced on both Wednesday and Thursday dealing with a rib injury. And if he ends up returning, he'll be a solid play. The Panthers rank 20th in tackling, and Kamara is one of the most elusive backs in the league. However, week 1, Kamara ran a route on just 53% of Jameis Winston's dropbacks, which is like 15% lower than his season average last year, and we need these routes because he survives and thrives off of targets. But maybe the injury had something to do with this, and he's only 3% owned in my ownership projections, which are on Patreon, linked down below, with a bunch of other tools that allowed me to win $30,000 and $70,000 last year with those same tools. If you're interested, check the link in the description. Now, I'm also interested in Miles Sanders, who is a top 5 matchup this week against the Washington Commanders, because they rank 29th in run defense so far, and the Eagles, who had the top offensive line last year, they allow the 3rd most yards before contact this year. That's what they're generating, which is great for Sanders. It means easy yards. And Sanders is seeing the usage. He saw 70% of the opportunities in week 2, which led to 20 total touches, and that's RB1. That's elite usage, but he's not priced like that at all. Plus, the Eagles are 6.5 point favorites with a nice team total this week, which usually usually leads to good environments for running backs. So consider Sanders and then play this obvious quarterback, and it's $8,200 Josh Allen. He seems insanely expensive, but it's worth it, and you should still play the dude because he plays the Dolphins, who rank dead last in pass rush right now. So you're going to tell me that Josh Allen, who's been this good, now is going to have all the time in the world for a guy who has scored 33.5 and 29.7 fantasy points, and when you factor in the DraftKings bonuses, over 30 points each week, yeah, I'm going to play him. And I'm also interested in this cheap tight end, and that would be Tyler Higby, who's $4,500. Now, I'll be honest with you, my ownership projections are saying that he might be the most owned tight end this week, and we'll have some pivots a little bit later on in the video, but it makes sense because he's dirt cheap at $4,500 and his usage has been elite. He leads all tight ends with 20 targets right now and an insane 26% target share. That's like higher than most teams' wide receiver ones, and he's doing this playing next to Cooper Kupp. Crazy. And Pro Football Focus says he has the second best matchup this week against the Arizona linebackers. He has Xavian Collins, who is allowing 71% of the balls coming his way, the targets, to be caught. Good spot for Higby. And I also like his quarterback naturally in Matthew Stafford, because Stafford is surprisingly cheap as well. He's $6,500 and he has the best matchup on the slate. If you've been watching football the first 2 weeks, you know the Arizona Cardinals secondary is atrocious. They rank 32nd in coverage this year, and now they have to go up against Cooper Kupp and that guy we just mentioned, Tyler Higby. And oh yeah, Allen Robinson's out there? Okay, thank you, Stafford. Let's take him. And then take this top 10 wide receiver who people continue not to want to play. That would be Mike Williams, who's just $6,700 in a really nice matchup. He has now played 5 games without Keenan Allen, including last Thursday night when he went off as a top 10 wide receiver, and he averages over 21 fantasy points per game and 8.5 targets per game when Allen is out. And Keenan Allen is not trending in the right direction for this week, but even if he was, it's still a good spot for Williams. Just make sure Justin Herbert is going to be playing this week as he battles a rib injury, but right now he's expected to. Now, this next guy's name barely fits in the box, but $4,700 MVS, he's not a guy you're playing in your cash lineups. He's a guy you're playing as a leverage play for a lot of upside, because look at this. The guy only has 11.4 total points on the season, so nobody's interested in him because he's not producing, but he's still a top 2 wide receiver in terms of how he's being used for Patrick Mahomes, and last week alone you saw it. He ended up seeing more usage. He saw 7 targets in last week's game, and he played on 10% more of the snaps. He has a dynamic ability downfield, and eventually it's going to be clicking with Mahomes. Plus, he has a solid matchup versus the Colts secondary, who ranks bottom 10 in the NFL, so play MVS, and the weeks to play him are when he's going to be 1% owned. And now this next dude might pick up some more ownership, but not a ton. And it's Jacoby Myers, who just week in and week out continues to be disrespected at $5,000 flat. Even though he ranks top 10 in his target rate, the amount of times he's being targeted when he runs a route, which means he's getting open often. And now he faces the Ravens, who, if you look at this chart all the way to the left, this number 927 is the Ravens. That's how many passing yards and receiving yards they've given up this year, by far more than any other team. So consider Myers, he's a decent value, and then the same thing could be said for this running back. And that would be Josh Jacobs, who's $5,400 this week. It's a nice price point for a clear running back one, because Jacobs is seeing a top 5 opportunity share, and last week he saw 90% of the backfield opportunities. He's breaking tackles and faces a bottom 10 tackling team in the Titans defense. Now, his main concern is that he's not running routes. He ranks 20th in route participation out of running backs. Amir Abdullah is taking some third down snaps, maybe Brandon Bolden if he returns, but it's still a nice spot for a guy who's going to see 15 plus touches and the red zone work. I like Jacobs this week. I took him over 59.5 rushing yards. This prop hit for us last week on his rushing yards. We're going to continue to ride it. Again, you can too. Free bet up to $100 Rooskies, people. Link down below in the description. Now, another nice price running back is going to be David Montgomery at $5,900, who will pick up some more ownership, which is why AJ Dillon and Josh Jacobs are going to be lower owned. But this guy has been fantastic. He led the NFL last week with 6 runs of 10 plus yards, meaning that he still has bursts and explosiveness. And now he faces the Houston Texans, who rank 32nd in the NFL in run defense, and oh yeah, they rank 25th in tackling. When Montgomery last week, 8 broken tackles, top 3 in the NFL. Great spot for the guy. Now we have to track the injury news on this next RB, and it's James Conner, who injured his ankle. It's not thought to be major, but he didn't practice to open the week, so just follow this, and here's why. Montgomery week 1 played 71% of the snaps, but he got pulled in the 4th quarter blowout. He was well on his way to playing over 80% of the snaps, which would have been a top 5 role in the NFL. Plus, he saw all the red zone usage and many of the routes run, which means he has the fantasy cheat codes. Now, he faces the Rams, who have the #1 run defense through 2 weeks, but he's going to be lower owned, especially if there's an injury here, and he's going to see all of the touches, 15 plus touches with red zone and passing game work. It's something to think about. And it's also worth thinking about this quarterback, and that would be Joe Burrow, who at $6,600 is struggling against too high defenses. He's seen the most too high defensive looks so far, and it's not going well. Last year, he was the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, and now he ranks 29th through 2 weeks, which is 6 yards per attempt. However, lucky for Burrow, he has a get-right spot against the Jets secondary that ranks 29th in coverage, so I think it's a good spot to try and get a bounce back on Joe Burrow. My #1 stacking option, factoring in the price for him, would be T. Higgins. And now let me tell you about this sneaky wide receiver. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's going to be $9,900 Cooper Kupp, who seems like you shouldn't play him at that price tag, but I'm going to be wanting to play him. He's my #1 stacking option with Matt Stafford. And you can see from my tweet, he now averages in 19 career games with Matthew Stafford 26.7 fantasy points, over 12 targets per game, and 115 yards per game. And here's here's what's interesting about that yardage. He's averaging 115 yards per game, but his player prop is set at just 98.5 receiving yards. So I'm smashing the over right here, and I think right now this is probably your best one you should do against the dead last ranked secondary of the Cardinals. Go get this bet right now with the free bet up to $100 in the description. This is the best bet you can make this week. And then play this lower owned tight end. And I'm talking about Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert, who's below $5,000, and this is a steal in my opinion because his usage has been elite. He has ran a route on 92% of Jalen Hurts' dropbacks, which ranks second in the NFL. And not only is he seeing good usage, but he's making the most of it. He has over 100 yards after the catch, by far the most of any tight end by like 30 yards right now. This dude produces, play him. And the same could also be said for this AFC tight end. And that's Gerald Everett, who is only $4,400. He's even cheaper. He might not pick up a ton of ownership because of Tyler Higby being right there in the price point, but he's seen 14 targets so far, 7 per game. Justin Herbert, since entering the NFL, targets tight ends at the 3rd highest rate in the league, so this is great news for Everett. And similar to Dallas Goedert, he's seeing a lot of yards after the catch, meaning he's producing on his own, which means explosive plays are here, and he's attached to Justin Herbert. Just make sure Herbert is healthy, but a nice play. Speaking of that great quarterback, Justin Herbert would be a slam dunk play this week with a 27.5 point team total against Jacksonville at $7,400. He's not that expensive relative to some of the guys above him like Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, and Allen. But you have to track the injury news. I assume he plays. He's day to day right now. He's participating in individual drills, but he might be somewhat limited, and who knows how it affects him. But because of this, he'll be low owned, and you can get these stacks, which have a ton of upside at really low ownership. Herbert, Mike Williams would be my number one option for him. Christian Kirk is a really good run back, and then you could put in Gerald Everett there, Josh Palmer if Keenan Allen doesn't play, and you have a nice double stack. I want to be double stacking these great offenses. And I also want to be playing this low-key stud. And that's Brandon Cooks, who only scored 9.4 fantasy points last week. However, yet again, he had 10 plus targets for the second time this year, and now he has 22 targets on the season. But that's not all, because now he faces the Bears secondary that ranks 27th in coverage, so expect Cooks to cash in on these targets. So much so that I won his over 60.5 receiving yards. We took this same prop and number last week. The man only had 54.5 receiving yards, but he saw the volume. He's going to get it again. Take this with that Cooper Kupp prop or some of the other ones we talked about. Link in the description below. Go get your free bet. And then play this massive upside receiver, because $6,300 Gabe Davis is a volcano waiting to erupt. He didn't play week 2, so track his injury. He's practicing limited so far. We'll see. But week 1, he only saw a 15% target rate, meaning that he wasn't getting open all that much. He wasn't being efficient. Honestly, he didn't play great. But here is the crazy part. This man didn't play great week 1 and still finished as a top 15 wide receiver, putting up nearly 20 fantasy points and 88 receiving yards. That's how good this offense is. So if he starts getting open, oh boy, the volcano will erupt. And now this next wide receiver, he's already erupted this year. And that's going to be $7,600 Tyree Kill, who, yeah, you know he's going to be a great play. You know he's a good option. He's second in the NFL with 25 targets, but he's priced nowhere near the elite receivers. $2,000 cheaper right now than like the Devontae Adams and Justin Jeffersons of the world. And he'll have a decent matchup against the Bills secondary. Overall, it's a solid defense, but one-on-one matchups against Benford, who's a bigger, slower cornerback, and then Teron Johnson in the slot, who's allowing 75% of the passes his way to be caught. Yeah, good matchup for Tyreek. And it's also a decent spot for Christian Kirk, who at just $6,200 is not priced like a true wide receiver 1, which he's been so far. And Trevor Lawrence trusts him. He has 18 targets through the first 2 weeks, and last week he caught 100% of his targets. And by the way, these targets have a ton of upside. 5 red zone targets. We already know Christian Kirk can win deep and out of the slot and that he's great, he's fast, but we haven't seen red zone targets that much in his career. He already has 5 through 2 games. I like Kirk this week against the Chargers. Expect him to play from behind and him to see maybe double-digit targets. I take his over 59.5 receiving yards. You can get this linked down below. And let me tell you about this tight end that I love. And that's going to be $4,600 Zach Ertz, which this tight end position right now, the 4K range is elite, and Ertz is not going to be owned. Even though last week he saw 11 targets and ran a route on 93% of Murray's dropbacks. You shouldn't pay attention to week 1 when he only saw 4 targets because he was limited. He was dealing with injury. His first full week, 11 targets. Now here's what this means. Zach Ertz is a top 5 scoring tight end while being limited week 1 and ranks first in tight end usage so far. But most people aren't viewing him like that. He should be $1,000 more in DraftKings. Play him this week. These are your must-have plays for week 3. You obviously can't fit them all in one lineup, but you should be using this player pool. And you should also be using projections, ownership, a lineup optimizer, and a lot more if you actually want to win. So if you want to get those key DFS tools, you can check the link down below to Patreon. You can join the 1,000+ other people using those tools, myself included. Won $30,000 and $70,000 last year with the exact same enhanced now tools. Check the link below to learn more. And if you're not already subscribed to this new DFS Salvetri channel, hit that subscribe button.